Hello, everybody. This is Constance from Mysterious Galaxy. I want to thank you for joining us so much tonight. We have an awesome evening of thrillers for you. So we are here today for Neal Griffin's new book, The Burden of Truth, and he is going to be in conversation with another author many of you may know, Matt Goldman, who has a book coming out later this year that is called Dead West. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Matt. Also, make sure if you have any questions that you'll see to put your comments down below because I'll be passing them on to our authors. And if you would like signed copies of Neal's book, you'll see the link up above and you can click there and purchase signed copies. Have a great event, guys.
Thanks, Constance.
Thanks, Constance. Constance is, I thought she was going to introduce us. So, I'm going to read Neal's introduction so I don't miss anything. So Neal Griffin was in his 25th year of police work in California when his debut novel, Benefit of the Doubt, was published by Forge Books and spent 2 months on the LA Times bestseller list. The publisher said, do it again, and Neal retired from law enforcement and turned to writing full time. He has since released A Voice from the Field and By His Own Hand, also published by Forge Books. Now Neal's fourth novel, The Burden of Truth, is available. It's his first standalone, and it's set in the San Diego County community of Vista. And the book tells the story of Omar Ortega, an 18-year-old Mexican-American who definitely straddles the line between overzealous cops and bad actors in the barrio until his luck runs out. In a starred review book list called The Burden of Truth, one of the finest reading experiences of the year. That is good. That's a good review.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the book, about Omar and Travis, and this is your first standalone.
Yeah, it is. Good to see you again, Matt. I guess just in the way of background, I would tell people that may or may not be familiar with my work. I've written 3 novels. They were all set in the fictitious town of Newburgh, Wisconsin, a small town that's in Waukesha County outside of Milwaukee, with a cast of characters that have been very well received. Ben Sawyer, kind of a cop that's had to kind of walk the road of perdition to get back to his career after some pretty tough times out in California. A young detective named Tia Suarez, who most readers really feel a kinship to. And then also a character that was at Newburgh in the 3rd novel, By His Own Hand, Travis Jackson. But as that novel concluded, Travis had decided that he was going to try and step up his game a little bit. No offense to small town law enforcement in the Midwest, but he wanted to come out and play with the big dogs, as he said, and work in San Diego. So he ended up getting a job at the San Diego County Sheriff's Office. And I wrote that knowing what I wanted to do with my next book, which was to tell the story that has been heavy on my heart, actually, for a lot of years. The fictitious character of Omar Ortega, who is completely fictitious, but I've met dozens of men just like Omar in my career as a police officer. Omar is a great kid, but he lives a life that's basically a zero-sum game. He is walking that fine line that I refer to as the hazardous middle lane of barrio street justice. On the one side of him, he's got the cops who come into the community. The only thing they have to connect themselves to the community is their badge and gun. They come in and they police the community. They provide their brand of law and order. The kids don't go to school there. They don't shop there. At the end of their shift, they pack up and they go home. And on the other side of him, he's got the bad actors. Mm-hmm. And the lexicon of law enforcement, we call them the bad guys. And that's no intentional disrespect, but these are people, these are young men particularly, that extort, harass, and rob local businesses, who organize, who operate basically low organized crime. And they're the gang members. So Omar's situation is he's walking that fine middle line where the police officers see him as maybe someone that's involved in the gangs, and the gang members see him as someone who needs to pony up. He needs to step into the game and get jumped in and start doing the work and paying the tax. But all Omar wants to do is take care of his family. And that represents a very large number of young men like Omar who are living that life. And I've been anxious for a lot of years to tell his story. So I created a situation in the last novel with Travis coming out here. And now Travis is assigned to the Vista substation for the sheriff's office. And he and Omar, they have a story to tell together, basically.
Do you think you needed, as a writer, do you think you needed those first 3 novels to get your game in place to write this novel?
Yeah, well, like as you well know, writing is like playing the piano. You get better at it with practice. You get better at it when you go along with it. So I think this is a novel I wouldn't have been comfortable writing until now. Couple of reasons. One, I would want to be retired as a police officer to tell a story that's fiction true to life, that's really about Vista, that's really about the sheriff's office. I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that as an active duty police officer in San Diego. But I think I needed to kind of make my bones, if you will. So I feel great with the way it turned out. I think it's been a work in progress for a lot of years.
Now, and your first 3 books are set in small town Wisconsin, which, I mean, I'm in Minneapolis right now, and I know small town Wisconsin. I spend quite a bit of time there. How big of a difference do you find your setting as character between small town Wisconsin and San Diego?
Yeah, it's everything, actually. As you said, it's small towns in Wisconsin or probably a lot of places in the Midwest or all over the country. Very often are generations deep of the people who live there. They're set in their own way. They're rather inculcated and not necessarily cut off from the larger world, but they definitely kind of live a separate existence. Whereas in San Diego County, there's 4 million people, which is more than live in the state of Wisconsin. And I remember when Vista was a town of about 15 or 20,000 when I first got here, and now it's 5 times that. And it's a hard scrabble town, Vista. It's certainly got its parts of the town that are doing very well, but it's also got a part that you're talking about first generation immigrants. You're talking about people that are definitely working class and are living at best paycheck to paycheck. So it's a different world, and it was a different world building experience. But writing small town Wisconsin, I was able to call on my own history, and writing San Diego, I'm just able to use my own current experiences.
And writing about a real county and a real police station, did that feel like a transition from the fictitious? Did you feel it gave you less freedom or more details, or how did you experience that?
Yeah, it was different. And I know that you write fiction true to life. You write about real communities and real cities. And I hadn't done that. So when I decided to write about Vista and to write about Vista and put it in a book and create world, I wanted it to be authentic. So for the first time as a writer, I drove out into that community and kind of tried to get a feel for South Santa Fe Avenue and the La Gordita diner that the cops would eat at, and the areas that the gang would feel like what was their turf. So I did try and avoid real references to an actual gang because I don't want to glorify that.
Right.
And I also was careful about, if it was, for instance, the Omar Ortega's apartment, I didn't give a real location on that. But other than that, I tried to stay very true to life.
Good. And you mentioned the cops, the police in the book don't live in the community they're policing.
Yeah.
That seems to be a big factor in what's going on in our country today right now.
I think so. And the fact is that Travis Jackson, who is the protagonist police or sheriff's deputy in this case, in this book, Travis comes in from he didn't grow up here. He moved here from Wisconsin specifically to be a a Southern California police officer, which, by the way, is not an uncommon experience. This is a great place to be a cop. People love to come to San Diego, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Albuquerque, Phoenix. They come from all over the country to become police officers in the Southwest of the United States because it's just a great place to be a police officer. And Travis is that guy. And when he moves here, he doesn't live in Vista. He doesn't even live in San Diego County. He comes down from Temecula every day. So what you wind up with is a police officer who's his only connection to the community, again, is his badge, his paycheck, and his brand of law and order. Other than that, he's completely disconnected. And I think that is a trend in American law enforcement. Only about 40% of cops live in the communities they actually serve. And in fact, in your hometown of Minneapolis, it's as low as 8%.
Yeah.
So it's an issue. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. What makes Southern California or the Southwest such an attractive place? Is it for police officers? Is it opportunity? Is it just that because the weather's good, the beach?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the allure of Southern California and the beauty of San Diego and Los Angeles. And that's all. I mean, you know, it's funny. I love to read Tammy Hoag, and she writes some great novels about being a cop in Minneapolis in the winter. I remember she wrote a scene once where the cop was trying to write a ticket, but the ink in his pen had frozen.
Yeah.
We don't have that problem here. So yeah, it's a great place to be a cop. It's very professional. The training's great. You know, I mean, I've worked with cops from or trained at least with cops from all over the country, but there is a draw here. So we do wind up with police officers that are specifically here. I don't want to call them mercenaries, but they're specifically here to do that job. And yeah, it's a different, as opposed to my town of Newburgh in my first 3 novels. All those cops grew up in Newburgh,
right? And
they work in Newburgh, and it's a department of maybe 20 cops, which is, by the way, the average police department in this country is less than 15 police officers.
Yeah.
So that's another reality.
It's a little more Mayberry in that way, where you know the town drunk and you
absolutely
walk them home and put them in a shed or whatever one does. So what, like you and I have met before, we're with the same publisher, but I've never asked you about how you became a writer or when that process started for you, because like I've been writing novels for my 4th is coming out in August, but I've been a professional writer in TV and theater since my early 20s. When did you make that transition?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm not actually sure, other than to say this, that I grew up in a world with a dad who was a college professor. I grew up in a world of books. I grew up in a world that really respected not only reading, but just really the power of a well-told story as a way to really understand the world around you. You know, I grew up in a town where 98% of the people look just like me.
I know. And I was there last fall. It's a beautiful town, by the way.
Right. And when my dad, when I was 15 years old, I love Stephen King, but he took a Stephen King novel out of my hand and gave me Richard Wright's Native Son. And I devoured that book. And then after that, I read Black Boy. So I think those were some of the experiences that I had early on that I valued so much: the power of story and the power of connecting or challenging your world by reading other people's experiences. And then after 20, 25 years of police work, and cops are just natural storytellers. Everybody wants to hear what they did at work. And it was my wife, actually, who just finally encouraged me. She said, maybe she was getting tired of hearing the stories. He said, you're always telling these stories. You should put pen to paper. And at some point I did. And I started developing my own. And I think really what compelled me was in 2010, 2012, with the ubiquity of cell phones and the new reality of law enforcement, which was, I used to tell kids in the academy, just imagine you're always being filmed. By the time I left the academy, it was understand the fact that you're always being filmed.
Right.
And that's changed everything. So my first novel, Benefit of the Doubt, was a story about a police officer who's a great cop until he has a really bad experience and he snaps and he commits an act of misconduct that's so egregious. He's the new poster boy for police brutality. And I think I enjoyed the opportunity to try and start challenging people's assumptions about police work and what they thought they knew. And you're a writer, so you know that's what you're always trying to do is challenge people's most bedrock assumptions. So that's what I was trying to do. And the next thing I knew, I was going to conferences, and I got an agent, and I sold a book, and I said, hey, this isn't bad. I think I'll keep at it.
Are there any parallels between a cop on the beat who's interviewing witnesses or potential suspects and trying to piece together what happened, where the truth might lie, and the writing process? Are there parallels there or not?
Well, I take that as, I mean, there are certainly nuggets of truth in all my books. In fact, in the first one, I was probably a little sloppy because I had cops coming up with open to page 313, and they're like, hey, I recognize this guy. And I'd say, no, you don't. Plausible deniability, right? But I've been a little bit more careful. But I'd like to think that, for instance, the character of Tia Suarez, she's a wonderful young woman, Mexican-American who lives in Wisconsin, who's in police work. And I'd like to think that Tia is really representative, kind of an amalgamation, if you will, of the finest female women police officers I've worked with. And what I really like about Tia is she recognizes the inequities of the system. They're in her head, but she's not like out there looking for a break. So I've had a lot of women police officers come to me and say, you don't need to concentrate so much on Tia's, how unfairly she's treated. And I go, well, she is treated unfairly. She just doesn't react to it.
Right.
And I think that's, really the way women police officers are. They're working in an organization that's 85% men.
Right.
And they're in a predicament where, they have to walk this line where they have to work a lot harder and do a lot better, but they don't complain about it. They just do it. And
is your thought process, are you using the same like gears and cogs and tools as a writer that you used as a cop to figure out what's going on, or is that a completely different process?
It's probably a different process. The closest I would come is I recognize what would really happen next. And I'm not critical of people or writers or anyone. I mean, fiction is fiction, but I think that the only thing that really connects my old world to my real world, my writing world, is that I do like to stay very procedurally accurate. Right. So, and I think I've gotten some credit for that, not only from critics or readers, but also, most cops agree, that could happen. And I think in this book, The Burden of Truth, I think it's very true to life. And the fact that it's about a real organization, I like all the cops in this book. There's not one of them that I wouldn't say I could work with that man or woman.
Right.
They've got their blemishes, but these are great characters, and I think they're really representative of the people I worked with.
Great. Good. And do you know what your next book is? What's coming?
No, not. I'm waiting to see. I have a book that I'm working on that's under contract with Forge. Going back to the beginning of Benefit of the Doubt, what I had was in that particular book, I had a character who was a central character, but the fact that he was elderly, retired, in a wheelchair, and had a stroke, he had a story to tell. He just couldn't tell it. Right. So I decided it would be kind of fun to do the coming of age story of Lars Norgard, who's a character in that first book.
Sounds like a character in one of my books.
Yeah.
It's just a name.
Yeah. So I've set it back in 1970, and it's going to be a prequel of The Benefit of Doubt. And I like it because, it's just going back now. And I mentioned to some folks that I was fortunate enough, I told them about our broadcast tonight, to come across a really, really colorful figure that was a rookie police officer in 1970. He just had a hell of a career in Milwaukee. So he's been he's literally a godsend, and we talk a lot. And as soon as I hang up the phone, I start typing because he's just a great resource. You know how that is. You meet somebody that's just, you don't want to put them in your book, but just the way they get your creative juices going is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What about Matt? I'm anxious to hear though. I've read your first book, Gone to Dust, and I just thought it was an incredible premise where you had your crime scene was literally adulterated with hundreds of vacuum cleaner bags to destroy all the evidence, and had a lot of fun with that. And you created a character, Nils Shapiro.
Nils, yeah,
Nils,
Nils Shapiro.
and he's been in all your books.
He has been in all the books.
Is he in Dead West as well?
He's in Dead West. The first 3 books take place in Minnesota. In the fourth book, a wealthy elderly couple in St. Paul, their grandson has just turned 35 and inherited his multi-million-dollar trust fund and moved to Los Angeles. And they're scared to death he's throwing it away, investing his money in show business. So Nils is the guy they trust. They send him out there to see what's going on. And it was really, I spent a lot of years in Los Angeles.
I was going to say, it sounds a little autobiographical.
Yeah, writing television.
Yeah.
So it was just fun to go back and remember what it was like for me to experience that culture shock for the first time.
Yeah.
And see it through Nils' eyes. And then so there's Hollywood stuff in there and there's LA stuff in there. And the book starts in Minnesota, and there's a part in the middle of Minnesota and it ends in Minnesota, but it's mostly Los Angeles.
Well, I refer to your book a lot because I was going to write what I think we as writers call fiction true to life.
Right.
And in your first book, Gone to Dust, I thought you did a really great job of respecting Minneapolis and Edina and local locations and local organizations. And, I got to say, I'm anxious to hear the feedback because I really try to be careful of that. There's a highway out here that takes us from the what we call the North County Inland out to the coast, the 78, and the exits on the 78. And so I tried to be real respectful of that. I thought you did a great job of that, though.
Thanks. I think readers who live in that location love it. Mm-hmm. But also what I was surprised to find that when you write quite specifically about a place, readers who don't live in that place they like coming into your world. And when you're very specific, it's real and it feels real to them. Mm-hmm. And so, the question I get in Minnesota is, do people who not live here, do they get it?
Yeah.
And the answer is yes. Now I'm looking at the bottom of the Zoom screen and I see there's a chat going on. So we do have questions coming in.
Let's do it.
All right. It's to everyone. So I guess that's both of us. Have you ever been scared that you'd be attacked by cops or people you arrested for becoming a writer and pulling from experiences? That's a question for you. Yeah.
No, I certainly haven't. I think I understand the question. I've never been as a writer. I'll just tell you this. When I first started writing, it was a very private undertaking. I definitely under wraps, and things started to move along, going to conferences and getting an agent and putting the book out there. But it wasn't until my agent said, "Macmillan bought your book," that I walked into the chief's office and said, "I need to tell you about something."
Yeah.
So at that point, I told one thing led to another, and I think it was in May of 2015, my first novel was published, and it was kind of interesting to watch the reaction of the department. And it was, bottom line, overwhelmingly positive. And so, by the way, was the reaction of the community. So I wrote that book as an active duty police officer. I was a little sheepish about its release because I don't want to call it a graphic novel, but it's an adult novel. And it is what it is. And then my publisher did very well. It had a good following and made a couple lists. So my publisher said, "Do it again." Well, when they did that, I was out at the FBI Academy on training. So I wrote that one kind of quietly. But I decided after that novel that it was one or the other, be a cop or be a writer. Because, like, for instance, as I said, this book, The Burden of Truth, I would have never felt comfortable writing this book as an active duty police officer because I just don't think it's fair to cops to have somebody that they're working with, taking this kind of a public stance. Sure. So I've never felt afraid, but I would say that on occasion I felt conflicted. So when the time came for that second novel to be released, I decided instead of a 30-year career, which most cops shoot for, I'd have a 27-year career, and I left at that point.
Great. So you mentioned that you like to challenge what people might assume cops are like. Yeah. What do you think the biggest misconception about cops is?
Great question. And I think we all know the answer.
Yeah.
I think in this age of cell phone, here's what I would say. Literally somewhere between 35 and 50 million times a year, law enforcement and civilians interact. And literally 98, 99% of those times, it is routine. Less than 1% of those situations will require the use of force. But with the ubiquity of cell phones and cameras, and the population of knucklehead cops that do exist, and criminal cops, and one of your officers back there in Minneapolis right now is the poster child. Somehow police officers are being painted with that brush, and I get it. And I can appreciate the fact that the 10 or 12 or 15 incidents a year that come out and go viral on the internet are ugly and awful, but they're not representative of the cops that I work with. I had the opportunity, as one of my last assignments, I was in charge or responsible for viewing police body cam video, thousands of hours. The number one thing it was boring, because most police work is really routine. It was often very comical. The cops get involved in a lot of really funny stuff, people at their worst, I suppose. It was often heroic. Cops do amazing things. Sometimes there were situations that you said that we could have done a better job there. But the least common thing it was, in fact, I never saw it, except on maybe one or two occasions, and we dealt with it, was when it was malicious. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be the issue that I would say that with right now, with the way cell phones are being used in the public, I think that's an assumption I'd like to challenge, that people are coming to the conclusion that that's what is typical in police work, and it's just not.
Yeah, you don't see the constructive interaction make the news.
I think police chiefs would do themselves a real favor by releasing video of the best and the brightest cops that they have.
Yeah.
I think they'd be doing themselves a favor.
Great. Here's another question. What was the hardest scene to write for this book, and what scene gave you the most joy or satisfaction?
Great question. If you haven't read the book, and I'm not giving anything away here, because it's revealed on page 5 that a police officer is murdered in this book, and I took that responsibility very seriously. The death of a police officer, the murder of a police officer, the assassination of an on-duty cop, and I think I wrote it in a way that I can stand behind it. I don't want to say that I'm proud of it, but I want to say that, yeah, this was a tragedy. It was a tragedy that was absolutely unnecessary and is brought on by happenstance. And I think writing that scene and the way that Omar mixes into that scene is really the culmination of the book. It's funny that it winds up being at almost the exact center of the story. I was surprised when it turned out that if you look at the page numbers, it's almost at like the very halfway point, and it's the breaking point in this book. But I think writing that scene was one that I was really careful about, and felt like I had a lot of responsibility to tell it well, and I like the way it turned out.
Great. Here's a question that let me ask you this one. What are you currently reading?
Well, that's kind of funny, because when I was waiting, I'm reading a book. Sorry, I'm not supposed to lean on camera like that. I just heard about this book, and it's a biography on the fighter Joe Louis back in the 1940s, and it's written by Randy Roberts, and I can't tell you where he's a professor, but he's a historical professor. But anyway, I heard about it as the best. No one biographically could ask for a better treatment. So the book is just called Joe Louis. It's by Randy Roberts. I get a break right now because I got a book coming out. I'm pretty far ahead on my manuscript. So I decided just to kind of step out and read this terrific biography. I just finished a book that I'll be with a guy next week that I have a great deal of respect for. His name's James Carlos Blake. And he just released his book, The Bones of Wolfe, which is the series of The House of Wolfe, which is just a terrific series. James Carlos is an amazing author, and he writes lyrical crime fiction in a way that
Oh, wow.
I never hoped to write it, but he is an amazing author. So I just finished that book as well. So I put those two books out there, James Carlos and his and any book written by James Carlos Blake. And this biography is it's been really interesting. Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'll answer that question too. I'm reading Sean Cosby's essay, Cosby's Blacktop Wasteland, which is about a criminal driver, someone who drives during heists, which is quite interesting. And I just finished Ace. I don't know if you've ever read Ace Atkins.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
His latest book, The Revelators.
Revelators. Yeah, I haven't read it yet, but I'm anxious to.
Is great, and I just kind of ripped through the Robert Galbraith books, which is J.K. Rowling's PI series set in London, that I found quite interesting. So, and Neil, you froze for a second. Oh, you're back. So anyway, that's what I've been reading. Here's a question. What projects are we both working on?
Okay, you go first.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I did used to work in television, and I thought I was done working in TV, but because I'm in Minneapolis now, but because of the virus, the writers' rooms are on Zoom, and so I've been asked to I'm working on a new show that will be on ABC this year, a comedy.
Right
on. I'll probably just be with it for pre-production, which is great. And then I have a standalone book that Forge has seen 25% of, and I made a deal for that book and for one more. So I'm going to finish that book right after that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Standalone. Fun. Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm working on a prequel, but really what I'm working on right now, candidly, is what is consuming me with fuel, especially in this time of Corona, is I've been very anxious to tell the story of Omar. I think it's a great story. I like the characters. I think about Travis and Ellie and some of the other characters in this book. So really right now, I'm just really anxious to, and I really appreciate so much the Mysterious Galaxy and all the independent bookstores. And you know this, Matt, of allowing us to still connect to readers. I mean, imagine where we'd be right now if we couldn't do this.
I know.
So I've been anxious for this book to come out. I've been anxious or wanting to tell this story for years. So really what I'm trying to do right now is navigate Corona and COVID and put out the story of Omar Ortega. And so far, it's only been a week, but I've gotten several letters from people. And I think one of the most touching letters I've got was from a woman that I actually worked with for a number of years. And she was so touched by it that ultimately she wanted to do something. She wanted to make a contribution. And I had mentioned that, one thing about police work and our current mentality is, community relations just kind of fallen off to the side.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough to work with the Police Explore Post for a lot of years and also with the Police Athletic League. And I just think those sort of organizations, those sort of community efforts should be funded with SWAT-like enthusiasm. I think we should feel as strongly about PAL and Explore Posts as we do about weapons and tactics. And she said the book touched her in a way that she made a contribution to a local organization.
Oh, great.
So I felt really great about that. So right now, my main goal is to stay connected to readers and tell them about this young man, Omar Ortega.
Excellent. Here's another question. Growing up, what authors inspired you the most? And did any of them influence you writing crime novels, or was your career the main reason?
Great question. I think, again, the first author that really started to draw me in, maybe a lot of people that grew up in the 70s, was Stephen King. Mm-hmm. He was prolific back then, still is. In fact, I just finished not too long ago, 11/22/63.
Oh, I read that book.
One of the great novels I've ever read.
I hate time travel, but I liked it in that book.
Oh my gosh, I've never read such an intricate, emotional story. But I can remember reading The Stand. I can remember reading Cujo. And I said, I remember my dad, the philosophy professor, pulling one of those books out of my hand and sticking me with Richard Wright. And I read Willa Cather. So I read a lot of authors, but the one that I read that really led me to police work, and he's so tired of hearing that because so many cops tell him that, was Joe Wampel. Joe was at his zenith when I was a young teenager, and I read The New Centurions, and I knew two things: that I just absolutely had to be a cop, and I had to be a cop in California. So that was my path. And then at some point, I maybe at some level wondered if I could imitate him. So I started writing. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Are there any TV series on the way for any of your books?
Boy, I would like to say yes. I've certainly got that in my head, but I was just listening to Brad Thor, who's one of the great spy writers and thriller writers of the last 20 years. And even he struggles with breaking that glass into Hollywood. So you could probably answer that better than I can, Matt. But so far, no film interest. Foreign interest, I was really happy to land a contract with a foreign publisher in Portugal. And that was soon followed by a foreign publisher in Finland, of all places. So I don't know what they want with me, but I'm excited about that.
My books are so Minnesotan that when they went out for foreign, both Norway and Sweden passed because they said my books were too Scandinavian. But that is, fortunately, that's changed. For the first book, Gone to Dust, will be out in Sweden, I think, in September.
Oh, nice. That's a good feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
So for whoever asked that question, yes, we all want to break the nut of film, but what really feels good is the idea that you're going to eventually get a copy of your book that you can't even read.
Yes.
But it's going to be in a foreign publication.
Yeah, I've been published in France. There's talk there's been talk and options of my books for TV, but I know some writers would get excited about that, but having worked a lot in TV, I know that means nothing until they actually
it happens, right?
Yeah. But Ace, we were talking about Ace Atkins and his Quinn Coulson series. I think this is the 9th or 10th book, and he just made a deal with HBO.
Yeah,
and HBO is the slowest development process in TV, so it could be 2 or 3 years until we see that.
If I were going to compare the Newberg series to anything on television, it would be not the movie, but the series of Fargo. And I think that was HBO. And it was 2 wonderful seasons, and I just dug it.
Yeah, it was
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, FX. Okay. And I just really think that, so maybe I'd have to say it's already been done. Like I said, not the movie, but the series, which if you haven't seen it, it's just,
it is very good.
Yeah, those are my characters. And
great.
I felt really good about that. But their Molly is my Tia.
Yes. That's a great character.
Yeah.
We touched on this a little bit, but this specific question is, what was the biggest difference between writing a cop in a small community versus a big community?
Well, I didn't get that far into it. First off, I did write small town police officers in Wisconsin. But in reality, when you look at what I wrote out of Vista, even though the sheriff's office is 2,000 members, it's 2,000 deputies, it's broken into small communities, if you're familiar with how sheriff's departments work. So really, the Vista Police Department, if you will, and sometimes they actually call themselves that, is probably 50 cops. So they're responsible for that block of jurisdiction. So to really make the leap from small town to big town, I'd probably have to write a book on like San Diego PD or LAPD. So I really haven't done that yet. But certainly I ramp up the engine of police work and the burden of truth, as opposed to some of the goings on in my first novels. But I really haven't written metropolitan police work yet. Which we'll see. I don't know. That might be down the line somewhere. Don Winslow, he did a lot of DEA stuff. He did a lot of San Diego stuff. And then he wrote The Force, which has now become pretty much the quintessential book on the New York City Police Department.
Yeah.
And but then again, he's Don Winslow. So
yeah. I just read that's what I just read, that book of 6 like novellas.
Oh, Broken. Wonderful stories.
Absolutely. Crime 101 is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I love that story in there.
Yeah, it was great. If for those who haven't read it, after you buy Matt's new book and my new book, then go buy Broken. And it's basically a love story to California crime.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful collection of short stories.
Yeah, and the whole 101 corridor between like Newport. Well, Does it go further south? It goes all the way from San Diego up the Pacific Highway.
I think in Crime 101, he actually retires up in North California, doesn't he?
But it starts in San Diego, right?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all over. It's everything on the North County.
Yeah. I'm seeing if I think those are the end of our questions. So is there anything else you'd like to say before we
other than what you and I talked about, first off, again, just to Mysterious Galaxy and to everybody that's tuned in, what a wonderful opportunity this is, because here we are, writers, and we're certainly used to the isolation of writing. I spend a great deal of time alone in my world, and as you know, we create these imaginary characters that really wind up being our imaginary friends who occupy our time, and we have relationships with them. But at some point, it's nice to step back out into the real world and talk about writing, and we can't do that right now. So the opportunity to do this is great, and I really look forward to looking out over the audience again. And I don't know that you and I, Matt, I think we were together at Men of Mystery. Were you up there a couple of years ago?
2 years ago, yes.
Yeah, and then we weren't on a panel, but we, back and forth, and that opportunity to just be amongst the people who love to read, and again, to that really pull something from story. So isolation is not what we're good at as human beings. I think it's better known as a form of torture than it is anything else. Right. So I look forward to getting back out there and being at Mysterious Galaxy with a real audience. But in the meantime, this is great, and I really appreciate people tuning in and asking such great questions.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks Mysterious Galaxy, and readers, please support your independent bookstores out there.
Absolutely.
They've really hung in there and done a great service during this tough time by offering curbside pickup and ordering books for people, and
hopefully maybe when your book comes out, who knows, I guess it would be pretty quick, but maybe you can come back out.
I would love. I'm looking forward to getting back out there.
Yeah. And I'll tell something else is Mysterious Galaxy is kind enough. They're having me sign a lot of books.
Great.
So if you want a signed book, order from an indie, order from Mysterious Galaxy, and if you want to personalize, which is often the case. I mean, I love being there to sign books when people tell me to sign it to their dad or their brother or whatever, and that's great. So we'll do that as well, and they'll ship it right to you, right to your door. Yeah.
Thank you, Constance.
Oh, thank you so much, Matt, and thank you so much, Neal. Congratulations, Neal, for your new book, and an early congratulations, Matt, for the one you have.
Thank you.
Tonight was such a pleasure. Thank you guys so much, and thank you for everyone for tuning in. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.